What's going on, YouTube? It's the NBA December 30th betting market video. Let's start off with Bucks Heat. Fat guy. 643 bets. The Bucks are -6. They've been bet up to -6.5. 68% of early bettors are on the Bucks. However, the juice is -112 on the Heat at +6.5. So not really much of a line movement per se, but the line move with the corresponding juice kind of makes it the same as before.
I don't even know if it's the same. Like I said, we're still compiling data. So you could make an argument that this is actually 6.5, even though you're getting more points with the Heat. The win rate at -112 might not be the 7 points between -105, -112. That might not even be worth that half point. So this actually could be a movement against the Heat, believe it or not. But then when this kind of stuff happens, it makes me more interested in the money line. Considering, look at the money line; it only dropped 2 points, and that's not two valuable ones from +214 to +212. So I don't like paying a lot of juice. So I'm not recommending betting the Heat, but I'm just explaining the economics of gambling here. Would I rather take 6.5 points with a really high juice rate, or I can just take higher variance and lower juice in theory, right? Just because 214 to 212 is so minimal, whereas -105 to -112 is considerable. And I'm not sure that half point adds up for that value. I know it's a lot of math and we're math heavy, but this is what it is. It's a market video and it's difficult. So like I said, when I'm looking at this type of stuff, it makes for me, it makes the Bucks more appealing as far as a spread pick, but it makes the Heat more appealing as far as a money line pick, considering the pricing that is laid out there.
And let's take a look at the OU, which opened at 227. It's still at 227, but the juice has been pushed up to -113 on the over. 55% of bets on the over, 98% of the money on the over.
Well, I mean, we've seen this a little bit since we've been doing these movies. 98%, because it's 643 bets for all three markets combined. They're not where we get our data, it's not able to split it up for you. So 98% of the money could be that there's one whale, so one wealthy Joe, one high betting Joe, or perhaps one pro or a couple of them at least have hammered the over for a big bet early. And I mean it's somewhat considerable, but they didn't actually move the line. They just moved the juice to. I guess they're trying to balance on that number. They probably like the number 227, to be honest. It's probably not that exploitable of a number. But then you get these little momentary price shifts, and perhaps the under, which was, I mean, 227 could be equilibrium at minus, at even money even. But then if you get plus money in the under, this could be a 3% play in the positive direction, because you're getting, an added 3% on your profit. So that could make the under a profitable play. And then because this is how the market works, it'll swing up that one way. Someone will go, you know what, that other price is pretty good. Swing down. It's just like anything. You know what I mean? So it is pretty interesting. But I expect buyback at some point for the under. And if more money piles in, they're just going to naturally move the line, because that's what they do. But that is interesting to me so far, the number, because the juice at +103 is attractive to me. I like winning percentages at that. And think of it this way: if the opening was -105, the line didn't even move, so you're just really getting like 8 points better from -105 to 103. So it's like it doesn't. It's not like a movement with a loss of value like an NFL thing. Like your team goes from 7.5 to 7. It's not like that at all. It's like this. The original price came out, that's possibly equilibrium, and then you're going to get an extra 8 points at 105, 8 points of 105, or an extra 3 points at +103. It's pretty interesting stuff.
Next up, Hawks Nets. There's 907 bets. The Nets opened up as 6.5-point favorites. They've been bet down to -5.5. The juice has swung crazy on that too, because they opened at +103 and now at 5.5 it's -110.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. We just spoke about this. We're trying to get a value of a point here. We're trying to learn what it is, and that's very important to knowing what points at what intervals are worth what. And these are following the same guy. Go ahead.
And I like what you said about the money line, because we can see here the this line difference between the -105 at +6 and -112 at +6.5 if that's in line with the money line, it's actually, you are correct that it is a move towards the Heat. Whereas here we can see from 6.5 to 5.5, even with these juice, the Nets went from minus 245 down to minus 230. So it's an idea. Like these markets aren't perfectly succinct, but there's definitely this is a tell that if this line has gone down and this line has gone down too, that the juice here, you can kind of make an inference on how much it does actually affect the line.
And we'll be doing more than inferring. We'll have enough data. We'll be able to tell you, well, that's if we decide to share it. This is a lot of work, ladies and gentlemen. That might be a membership thing. We'll be able to tell you the exact value of a point in the NBA, in the modern NBA. And what is interesting, Big Rye had mentioned it, but it's also the book that we're using as a benchmark here. It's Pinnacle. Might as well just get it out there. The best book in the world. It's been pretty interesting because minus 113 at 6.5 to even money. I mean, that's a movement, I would imagine, to 1 point, but it's still, it's not that crazy, right? Like, because even money is so much better than minus 113. They're using these, the juice to really influence, like, because for me, it's such a deterrent at minus 113 because the win rate at minus 113 is probably like I would only be able to beat it in my best NFL years. You know what I mean? So maybe I could still beat it. It doesn't matter. It's just more difficult to beat. It's just weird that they like flipping the juice pretty much. Like they're like these aren't really large moves, even though it did move a point. The juice is just flipped though. That's what's interesting to me because it really incentivizes both sides. So I guess this is their way of balancing. We're going to learn as we go along because we're learning with you as we make these videos. But like Big Ry said, it is actually a move against the Heat up top there. And this one is a move against the Hawks. But it's still not as bad as you would think out of the onset. But 5.5 with good juice, I feel like that's better than plus 203. Whereas up top on the Heat, I think that 212 is better than plus 6.5 minus 112, oddly enough.
And then the OU for the Hawks Nets game is 240, open 240, currently 240. The juice hasn't really changed much. 44% of bets on the over, 40% of the money on the over. There's not a lot to talk about.
Seems pretty lateral.
Market.
Yeah.
The next up we have Grizzlies Celtics. Celtics open as 7.5 point favorites. They've been bet down to 5 point favorites. 88% of bettors are on the Celtics, but 58% of the money wagered is on the Grizzlies for the first 832 bets.
Like I said, we're trying to. We don't really know much about it. We just understand markets. I did see scrolling through my news feed this morning. I did see that Jason Tatum was out for the Celtics, so I would imagine that has something to do with this line movement. And I always think like. You go, well, how do pros make all this money and stuff? Well, it's things like this. Even though there's much lower limits on opening lines. Imagine if you knew that Jason Tatum wasn't going to play an hour before everyone else did. Like you might have made up that 50 because look, 12% of the bet, 58% of the money just reeks of like, you know what I mean? Like pros knowing the news.
Yeah.
Kind of like Cleveland. A good example was Cleveland. Sorry to make an NFL crossover. Cleveland opened as 6.5 point favorites against the Steelers, who are a better team, and then it moved to like 10.5, and that's because they announced Big Ben later on, not when that line came out, that he wasn't going to be playing the quarterback. So you got to think like they try and make inferences from where things shift. And for us in that Cleveland game in specific, it was, why is this 6.5? It doesn't make any sense. That tells us that the book is preparing for a higher probability, not a slam dunk, that Ben isn't playing. And if the book is preparing for that, then we might as well side with the higher probability. So I would imagine that someone did probably know about the Tatum injury well in advance of everyone else, and he got the Grizzlies at a really good line. And that's not saying that, you know what I mean, that Grizzlies are going to slam dunk cover 7.5, but think about it. They have the value. This is how you look at it. They gained the expected value between 7.5 and 5. They don't care what happens in the game, but they know if they do this a million times, I don't know what the percentage is between plus 7.5 and plus 5.
It'd be close to this money line. So whatever the difference is between plus 262 and plus 181, which is a huge amount.
That looks like a lot. You know what I mean? Like that's a significant percentage, right? Yeah, we're gonna do a little math, Big Right. Get it out here. These market videos are math heavy, and off we go.
So 262 is 27%.
Yeah, I don't think it's that crazy. But you know what, though? Look at the juice. It was at even money.
And it goes to 35%. So 35% minus the 27 is a 7%.
There you go.
Difference, or 8% difference. So imagine what the fat guy is essentially saying is if you can get the Grizzlies plus 7.5 at even juice early on, if you made this play a million times, you'd be hitting
richer
against the spread at 58%, and 58 against the spread is unreal. Like that's
unbelievable.
It's essentially unheard of in our.
It's not unheard of, but it's very, very, very difficult.
There's only been one person to hit that over the long term in our football contest, and that is Cassone this year, who's hit at 61%, and there has been hundreds and hundreds of other people that haven't hit it. So it's very, very difficult.
Yes.
Very, very unlikely. Like probably like 1 in 400 to hit it 58% over the long term.
I think it's over long term. I think it's way lower than that. But
we're getting off.
We're getting off track.
We're essentially saying if you can buy a line early, there is more risk, but there is a lot more opportunity as well if you can be on the right side of line movements. And the news here with the Grizzlies at plus 7.5 going down to plus 5 most likely because Tatum's out.
That's our guess.
But there's so many other factors too that come into this. But that just shows you how valuable it is to get lines early. Fat Guy, we'll jump on. Next up is the OU for this game, which opened at 224, bet down to 217. 80% of the money on the under, and 80% of bets on the under, and 99% of the money on the under. So with this news as well, there might have been a huge shift on the OU
correlation, because perhaps I don't even know who Jason Tatum really is, which is the beauty of this too, to be honest. But if I were to make an inference about him, he probably pushed the pace. He's probably the biggest scorer, I would imagine, on the Celtics. That would be my guess. So if the possessions go a little bit longer and the chance of scoring goes down, so does the under. So think about this. I'm trying to conceptualize the type of person that's manipulating these markets, and it might not be one person. It's probably a couple, and they know that Tatum's out, so they capitalize in both spots. They get the Grizzlies at an excellent price, and then they get the under. And think about it this way: this might be a combined between both markets. They might have made something like 13%. And think about this: if you were a day trader, and you could make 13% on a trade in one day, holy, are you serious? 13% a year is good in one day. That's why there is the one thing, it is capped. You can't bet $1 million on this game. That's not like they always make it out like, oh yeah, the book will just take any bet. You can just show it with 100 million. They'll say yes. No, they won't. 100 million would break them. Do you know what I mean? A billionaire could break the sports books in Nevada. Just letting you know. So it's a lot smaller. We're fighting for scraps, but 13% on, $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000. I mean, that'll add up. It's going to add up, right? That's why it's a volume game. And there's a word for these people in the sports betting world. They're called grinders. And the better grinders, what they do is they pay for information. And I would imagine somebody got the jump on this right away. And I always had this theory. So I know we're going long with this, but it's way too interesting. I would imagine that social media has a lot to do with some of this stuff, and you could probably do a lot of good detective work with it. Not to mention perhaps having a trainer on the payroll or something of that nature. But on to the next one, Big Cry.
Another interesting thing is John Morant isn't going to be playing, one of the better players on the Grizzlies. So it's interesting to see that the line moved in the Grizzlies' favor despite that. There's also news that Tristan Thompson isn't going to be playing for the Celtics. So just some of the news that's come out so far on that game. Next up, the Hornets Mavericks, 794 bets on this game. Mavs opened at -7.5. They've been bet up to -8. 68% of bettors are on the Mavericks against the spread, but 59% of the money is on the Hornets against the spread.
Well, apparently, according to Big Rye, New York and Charlotte have mixed and become the Hornets. but regardless of that Canadian Eggcorn, we're gonna go with. Sorry, I lined it up like I was gonna make a pick, but I'm not actually not. I don't, like I said, I don't know anything about NBA. We're learning about it because the market is going to beat any of the handicapping as far as a time cost management concerns. So as far as this market goes, this also seems closer to a lateral move as well. Like,
yeah, it's actually moved for the Hornets despite the line moving here. Not, albeit 283 to 279 is not a large move.
It's less than 1%. It's way less.
It's not even really worth mentioning. Like it almost feels like they've moved some of these lines just to get more action on one side.
Yeah. Stagnant,
more so
right?
than anything else. And the bet percentages are interesting for this game because there is more money on the Hornets, but there are more bets on the Mavericks. So and it's not like a huge discrepancy either, with only being 794 bets. So this seems like it's going to be equilibrium for both sides. I don't think I see a lot of line movement on the money line or against the spread for this game.
You bring up an interesting point, though. You said that this is more about like it's a theory that it's price jockeying to try and incentivize. Well, think of it this way, because that actually makes sense to me. It's going to be Hornets Mavericks is going to be playing concurrently against the Lakers Spurs. Who are Joe's going to put their monay on more often?
The Lakers.
Lakers. It just is. There's no way around it. So what's a good idea? To at least trying to incentivize business. You don't want to get taken. The books don't want to get taken. So what do? They do this little number jostle around. They do a dip-deroo, whatever you want to call it, a little Canadian fun with that. And they just switch the numbers, and it's realistically pretty much the same. So, I think that's just probably an incentivizer, but it's a false one, if anything. And we're seeing a lot of those in these markets.
And then let's take a look at the OU. It opened at 222. It's been bet up to 225 and -109 juice on the over currently. 75% of bettors on the over. So lots of public on the over. We can't see what the money percentage is, but the books want to be taking a little bit less risk on that over by pushing that line up 3 points. It sounds like that's it for this game. So let's move on to Lakers Spurs. There's 832 bets so far. Lakers open as 6-point favorites, still 6-point favorites. The juice has not really moved on that game. 86% of bets, 90% of the money is on the Lakers. We're not here to give picks, but Fat Guy, this is very, very interesting that so much public, so much of the public is on the Lakers. However, this line has not even budged. It's budged literally 1% on the payout.
No, not even 1%. It's not even 1%. It's like 0.7, 0.8. It doesn't even matter. Like you're right. It's I think this is too early to tell. It's only 832 bets, but maybe the book is willing to take exposure on this one, because we already talked about who are people most likely betting. We don't have those numbers yet. We don't. So a lot of this is experience and wisdom from the past, going with, like, the Lakers are probably the most popular team in my estimation. I mean, where we live, we're Canadian, and the Lakers are a thing here. So I know lots of Laker fans, which, I mean, what do? They take their Bet365 money, they put $40, and they're going to put it on the Lakers. So that, I'm hoping that creates a big enough market to incentivize perhaps a Spurs play. Not that we're telling you to make a Spurs play, but look at this though. There's reverse line movement on the money line on the Spurs as well. Right before I said I'm not sure yet, the Spurs moved from plus 219 to plus 212 on the money line. So, however, though, that's a more significant shift. This is very, bizarre.
Well, this is interesting because we talked earlier about you can draw from the money line to the spread markets,
Kind
but
of,
they
yes.
still are separate. And this is separate because this minus 105 to minus 104 does not line up with this plus
No, not at all.
219 to plus 212. So there's actually been more movement for the Spurs on the money line. So in my head,
With less money on them.
the only thing is that we're not sure if this plus 219 matches up with this plus 6 minus 105.
Yes.
So we don't have enough information to tell you guys, if you're going to make a bet, the plus 6 minus 104 is more value. But assume if we made the assumption,
If it's lateral, it's way more valuable.
Yeah, if we make the assumption that this plus 6 minus 105 is equal with this plus 219, then this plus 6 minus 104 is going to net you
attractive.
it's going to net you like 0.5% more a year.
Yeah.
But 0.5% more if you could win at 3% or 3.5%. I know which one you're going to choose.
Yeah, exactly.
So those are very interesting. It's interesting that so much money and public sentiment has been put on the Lakers, which is going to be common for most Laker games. But for the line not to move at all, it looks like a very nice market indicator that the Spurs could be a good play. And then the OU for this game, open 230, bet down to 229. The bet splits are pretty even, 51-49, 51 favoring the over. However, 89% of the money has been put on the under. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just still mystified by this reverse line movement on the money line from the Spurs. And it's actually, this is one of those things that's screaming at me that the Spurs might be a play with perhaps a better price or better juice, at least, because juice does seem to have legs. As far as the OU goes, this is pretty lateral movement. It's weird to me, though, that a lot of what I thought were Joes or what I think are Joes are on the Lakers. It seems bizarre to me that they're on the under, which makes now it's like almost makes it dubious, right? But I'm doing a lot of mental gymnastics, don't forget here. But there might not be.
The other thing too is for player news, LaMarcus Aldridge is questionable for the Spurs, and then on the Lakers side, LeBron is questionable, and they also lost Alex Caruso, who's one of the key players on that team.
Yeah,
so
but
there's a chance
line.
that
Go ahead.
There could be a lot of change if LeBron or Aldridge is ruled out for either side.
I highly doubt LeBron isn't playing at full strength. Not that I know anything about his injury news. The only thing I do know is that would decimate this market. Like he's probably, I would imagine, the most line moving player, right? So you would see a different shift for sure. So it would be in favor of the Spurs, that's for sure. It would move against them. So maybe the Aldridge news, perhaps, as far as a defensive standpoint. Again, not that I know anything about basketball. I'm making that very, very, very clear. But there's also an idea, though, I had that perhaps the over-under market isn't really realized, especially because there isn't a move despite 89% of the money. So it doesn't really cross any threshold. So maybe this really is just equilibrium for the most part in the 229 to 231 range. And there isn't like a ton of value on either side. And this is just like a soft Joe's market. Always that possibility.
On to the final game, 10 p.m. Eastern time. Trailblazers take on the Clippers. 605 bets so far. Clippers open as 2-point favorites at minus 112. They've been bet up to minus 4-point favorites at minus 106. 60% of bets have been placed on the Clippers. 70% of the money is on the Clippers as well.
Yeah, and then that's from what we've seen, and we don't have the numbers yet because we don't have a full complete set of data. Is from 2 to 4 though. That seems to be a reasonable shift, reflecting that the money has been put on. And one thing I will say is I'm not seeing that the corollary between money line and spread is interesting to me, because I don't think that shift reflects a minus 133 to minus 173. We're gonna get good at these by the end of the year. In fact, by next year, we're gonna know exactly whether it's better to take the money line in this instance or the against the spread, considering variance as well. But that doesn't, to me, is an interesting thing. Is I'd rather take, given the option now, not that I know to a number, I'd rather take -4 at -106 than -173. That seems absurd. Same with the Blazers. I'd rather take 155 than I'd rather take +4 -104. I think, at least, right? Like, we're gonna learn. This is the fun part of that.
Yeah,
But
the difference between -2 to -4, according to these numbers, if we compare it to the money line, it's about a 3% chance that these 2 points, like, it's a 3% between 2 and 3, 3% between 3 and 4, roughly, is what you're looking at.
On to the over-under.
228 is what it opened at. It's been bet down to 226. 70% of bettors, though, are on the over, despite that line moving down. We don't have the money percentage information as well.
That's the one issue, though. It could be 70% of bettors, could be 90% of money on the under. There's always that possibility. And so I generally, when I see under moves, I do think professional, because the publics aren't exactly cynics. They're usually optimists. So not that they always pick the over, but as a collective, they tend to favor it. Think of any time you've ever sat in a bar or been around friends scrolling around. That seems like a big, or they never say that. I say that it seems like a big number. Then he goes, man, that's going to be a shootout. You say they think of things like that because they think of terms of entertainment first. What's entertaining to them? A high scoring game. Therefore, they have a proclivity to bet based on wishful results, right? And the other thing too is you're almost willfully ignorant of the number, right? Like, when you bet over, and you're just a really recreational bettor, you don't really think what the number is. Whereas when you bet under, it's that the number is more important. Like, 228, that seems a little big. You know what I mean? So generally, when I see unders, I do think it's pro action, but we can't be sure with the money percentage, unknown at this time.
Well, guys, thanks for watching, and good luck in your December 30 wagers in the NBA.